Hey everybody. So I'm doing mine on the zigzag clover and the red clover. They're very, very similar flowering plants to each other, and I'll tell you how to distinguish them from each other and how to identify these plants. So I found these ones at my grandparents' house in our waterfall area. We've got a giant man-made waterfall, um, and my grandma planted these seeds last summer, I think, or maybe earlier this summer. And I didn't even know that we had two different species of these clovers up there. I had noticed it after I left that area and noticed that I had a different one than what I had taken a picture of. Um, so the first one is the zigzag clover. It is known as the trifolium medium. The reason it's called the trifolium is because it's got the trifolium is the group of three leaves, and they're always going to be opposite from each other. So there's going to be one on this side of the stem and one on this side of the stem. Um, why it's called the zigzag clover, I don't know. But over here, if you look on the left side with the lighter flower, you can also see that the flowering itself is actually also a group of three petals. There's that main outside petal, and then there's also the two inside rounded petals. And that grows on a giant cluster. It turns out to be like a red clover, almost like the tree from the Lorax. I don't know why, but that's what it reminds me of. So next up, we've got the red clover, which, like I said, is very similar. Um, this is the picture of taken. This is like where it was growing on the moss on the waterfall. The water was turned off, so that's why there's no water right there. Let me get rid of these annotations. So the reason I'm also doing it on PowerPoint is because they're all dead now because we had a big freeze this weekend, and I'm also an Ely, not an Elko anymore. So this is the red clover. It's almost the exact same thing. It's got the group of three flowers. They're also opposite. You can see on the picture on the right. There's that group of three, and then this group of three. They're opposite on the stem. With the picture on the left, you can see how the cluster of the flower is put together, how it looks like a giant ball kind of. And these flowers are actually only like 2 to 3 centimeters in diameter. They're pretty small. But there's the whole flower head, and then the actual flower itself is even smaller than that, within less than a centimeter. So this is how you tell the difference between the two clovers. So on the left is a zigzag clover. If you look closely at the leaves, you'll notice that they're narrower and they don't have that white marking that looks like an arrow pointing to the tip. And the picture on the bottom right is also of the zigzag clover. So if you look at the top right, you see that arrow. That's what I'm talking about. That's how you can distinguish a red clover from a zigzag clover. And those leaves are also a little bit wider than those of the zigzag clover. And then here's a close-up of the actual petals of the flower. So again, you can see how there's 3 petals to each one on the cluster. Yeah. So this one, according to our botany book, Botany Today, the trifoliums are a member of the pea family. So they're related to alfalfa, sweet clovers, other clovers, and also peas and beans. Yeah. Yeah, so here's the picture of, these are the pictures I took of the red clover before I realized I had two different clovers. You can see those white markings on the leaves here, and the groups of three. And again, this is zigzag clover. You can see how the zigzag clover is skinny and narrow with the leaves, and then the leaves on the red clover have that white marking and they're whiter. These clovers are actually pretty long. The one that I have here in this picture was like 2 or 3 feet from where it was growing in the ground, which is pretty common for how big they grow. These plants are native to Asia and Europe. They're introduced into all kinds of other places. They grow pretty well, pretty much everywhere. And they are also a late bloom. So this is the bloom second week of October, and they're usually a fall bloom. So yeah, and that's that. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.